what other minority group has had the president rewrite federal executive orders on the first day of their presidency? On Biden's first day, he put into place that gender identity executive order. I think 1399, I think is the order, but he put that in on day one, and that was the day that I began to fight against this, because ultimately it's an attack on women, it's an attack on mothers, it's an attack on children, and this notion that human beings are something other than our sex is very dangerous.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast. Our guest today is Amy E. Sousa. She's got a master's in depth psychology. This is new to me, and I've been in therapy a lot, but depth psychology, she's going to explain to us what that means. The reason I started following her at Known Heretic on X, the reason I started following her is she speaks out very forcefully and very wisely and with facts about gender ideology. This topic is huge. I'd like to say it's shrinking, but I don't know that yet. I think maybe it's growing. You're going to want to hear her. Please hit that subscribe button. If you're on Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, just hit subscribe. We'd love to have you never miss an episode. And we've got a great catalog of past episodes that you can get to as well. Amy Sousa, Known Heretic. She says embodiment-focused writer, lecturer, activist, exposing the safeguarding failures of trans ideology and sharing resiliency building tools. She's really interesting, and she just tells it like it is. She is our guest next. Amy, I'm excited to meet you and talk to you. I follow you on X, and that's really all I know about you. Amy E. Sousa, M.A., depth psychology. And I had never heard that term before. What is depth psychology?
Depth psychology is a lineage of psychology that is post-Freudian, post-Jungian. It deals ultimately in the notion that we have an unconscious that is always at play and influencing us. And it really also includes the cultural aspect. So as a sort of branch of psychology, it has connections to a lot of cultural critique, as well as personal insights that a normal sort of behavioral psychology would have. It always is also looking at how the culture is influencing human psychology.
I am fascinated by that because there's no way that we can't be influenced by the culture that we're swimming in. And with social media in particular, we are swimming in the deep and often in polluted waters. And I think it's a tough time to be alive, frankly, particularly for younger people. And what attracted me when I started following you was your kind of your view of this gender ideology that's going on. And one of the things I loved was the way that you compared what we're seeing, what we're viewing, what we're accepting. You use the Little Red Riding Hood metaphor. And I thought this was fascinating because I'd never thought about this story that way before in my life. And here it is. I'm just going to read from your post a little bit. In Little Red Riding Hood, what we really see happening for her, meaning Little Red Riding Hood, is that her instincts, her direct sense perceptions of the situation are accurate. We know in the story, in this moment that is pictured here is this in this image. This is the moment in that classic tale where she is saying to him, but Grandma, what big eyes you have, what big ears you have, what big teeth you have. And he is saying, the better to see you with, the better to hear you with, and then the better to eat you with. So that she gets eaten, and that's the mistake she makes. So in other words, she knows what she's looking at. But the wolf is telling her, hey, don't worry about it. How did you, How did I this get by me in all these years that this is what Little Red Riding Hood was really all about? So you all know I spent nearly 3 decades on the sidelines, from the NFL to the NBA to the Olympic Games, you name it. And I've learned that real expertise comes from consistency, not guesswork. And that's why I'm excited to team up with Sports Corner Daily. Their free daily picks keep cashing with analysis so clear, even a casual fan can cash in. And, with the NFL and all the other big matchups, college football right around the corner, there's no better time to get in on the action. My listeners get 2 expert picks delivered free every single day. Just text BETS to 321-448-0691 or visit sportsdailypick.com to sign up in seconds. No cost, no risk, just smart winning insights. That's BETS, BETS, to 321-448-0691 or head to sportsdailypick.com. Don't wait. Kick off the season on the winning side. How did I this get by me in all these years that this is what Little Red Riding Hood was really all
Well,
about?
it's such an old tale that we hear when we're growing up, and I think a lot of times these things go by us as sort of a given, like, oh, it's just, we know it's kind of a story about stranger danger. That's kind of obvious, and we know it's a little bit about charm. Don't trust the wolf's charm. But I think those underlying lessons, those obvious things, yeah, they are, this is where the unconscious comes in. They are absorbed by our unconscious, but sometimes we don't think about them consciously. But once we start looking into it and exploring it in a conscious way, we see the true value of these lessons. And just like I said, this story is not a story in which she is confused about what she's seeing. So it's not about being tricked in terms of what she's actually seeing. Her instincts, her direct sense perceptions of reality are at work. They are functioning just fine. She sees the eyes, she sees the ears, she sees the teeth. The problem is not that she is fooled in what she sees. The problem is that she has allowed him to manipulate her out of trusting her own instincts. And that is the moment that
That's
she gets into trouble.
That is perfectly said. Your post goes on to say, but what we sometimes miss is that her direct instincts and sense perceptions about the situation are accurate. She accurately sees him for who he is. She sees the teeth. She sees the eyes. She sees the ears. She sees the wolf. He is not fooling her. Her instincts are accurate, but what happens is that she allows him to rationalize her out of her own instincts. And in this way, this is how she gets hurt. This is the lesson of the story. When you disregard your own judgment, your own instincts, this is how you get hurt. This is, we could apply this directly to this gender ideology, that we're looking at a male, who maybe has a beard, has facial hair, and is dressed as a woman and says, I am a woman. And somehow we get manipulated into accepting that. How is this, at what level is this happening? First of all, do you think this is as big as so many of us think it is, or do you think it's narrow? For a long time, I've been telling you about my friends at besthotgrill.com. So if you're tired of replacing your grill every couple of years, you'll want to check out the Hot Fast Solaire Infrared Grill from besthotgrill.com. I have one of these. It is amazing. Solaire makes these amazing American grills that heat up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. Yeah, I said that right. 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. Solaire infrared grills eliminate flare-ups and consistently make the tastiest, juiciest, most flavorful food. The Solaire infrared grills heat your food directly, not the air around the food like conventional grills do. And Solaire's been making infrared grills for 20 years and has really dialed in the design. Experience the Solaire infrared grill firsthand with the Solaire demo rental program. This is a great idea. You can try Solaire before you buy with the foods your family always enjoys, burgers, chicken, steak, without a salesman breathing down your neck, and see why Solaire is the last grill you will ever buy. Learn more at besthotgrill.com. Besthotgrill.com. Try before you buy with the Solaire demo rental program at besthotgrill.com. At what level is this happening? First of all, do you think this is as big as so many of us think it is, or do you think it's narrow?
No, it's massive. This, I think there's been a lot of really effective, ultimately psychological techniques that have been used to groom and manipulate the public as far as this ideology. And I think there's a lot of things like forced teaming. When you put together two different when you force two things together that don't really go together. And I think in terms of gay, LGB rights and trans rights, I think there has been a lot of manipulation that has put those together. But people who were fighting for marriage equality, people who were fighting to love who they love, they were never asking us to redefine language. They were never asking us to deny our own instincts or direct sense perceptions of reality. It's very different. And ultimately, this movement is coming from the top down, not from the ground up. It's not a grassroots movement. If you look at the lineage of civil rights, if you look at women's rights, if you look at Black rights in the United States, if you look at gay, lesbian rights, you see years of attempting to get recognition, of fighting for things. This has ultimately come upon us, and is supported by governments, is supported by corporations, is supported by major NGOs. The United Nations is pushing these policies as part of their sustainability goals into all 193 member nations. I sit on a call with an organization called Women's Declaration International. There are women from 137 countries who attend that call. There's a panel discussion every week, and we talk about the different strategies that different women are using to combat this in their countries. So this is not just something happening in the United States. This is not something that's just happening in Western countries. This is happening on a global scale, and it's in our education systems in multiple
Yeah.
countries. It's in the government. I mean, what other minority group has had the president rewrite federal executive orders on the first day of their presidency? On Biden's
Yeah.
first day, he put into place that gender identity executive order. I think 1399, I think is the order, but he put that in on day one, and that was the day that I began to fight against this, because ultimately it it's an attack on women, it's an attack on mothers, it's an attack on children. And this notion that human beings are something other than our sex is very dangerous. It's
Yeah.
the sex recognition instinct. All animals have this. Humans are not every single animal in the animal kingdom has reasons for sex recognition. These are reasons of both
Yeah.
procreation and safeguarding. All mammals know that the male of the species is going to have a lot more aggression, and mothers would be well to safeguard their young against that
Yeah.
violence and aggression. So our ability to recognize sex approaches ceiling. We are near perfect at it, even with no other cues of clothing or hairstyle. This is a primal instinct. So to me, ultimately, this is an attack on our instincts. uh many safeguarding. Go
Well,
ahead.
when you talk about the language, for instance, this notion of sex assigned at birth, assigned by whom? Like, who is assigning? You're born with a certain set of chromosomes and a certain type of genital, and that's it. And it's been that way from the beginning of time. So the fact that this is just here we are in 2025, and it's been several years now, obviously, but that someone is trying to tell us that our sex was assigned at birth, that kind of language
Well,
is
this is
nuts.
another example of the forced teaming, because the language
Okay.
of sex assigned, that comes from those who had intersex disorders, or what we call DSDs, disorders of sexual development. That language specifically has to do with that category, which is point.
Can you explain that category in a little bit more depth? What does that look like? What does that
Well,
mean?
0.002% of the population are born with disorders of sexual development, meaning at birth they have ambiguous genitalia. There's about
Okay.
40 known conditions that exist, and ultimately, most of those conditions become apparent at puberty. So, even within those conditions, we have the technology now that we recognize most of them at birth, and those that we don't recognize at birth, most of them are apparent upon puberty. But even within those conditions, so I'm going to try to make this very simple. Sexual development within mammals is mutually antagonistic. So once one pathway begins to develop, the other is automatically inhibited from developing. So you can either be on a male path as a male with a male disorder of sexual development, or you can be on a female path as a female with a female disorder of sexual development. So there's a lot of forced teaming from the ideology that tries to say that there are some third or other sexes, but even within those who have intersex and DSD conditions, they are 100% male or 100% female. They are not an other. They're not male or not female. They simply have a developmental disorder, just like we might say someone who has Down syndrome, they also have a chromosomal disorder.
Okay.
They are not
So when
human. They're still human.
Right. So when you say they are 100% male or female, is that based on the XXXY chromosome?
It's based on, they can have a chromosomal abnormality, so they might be XXY or XXX. But it's based on the chromosome, but it's also based on what path their body took in terms of development. So we are either on a path that is organized to develop eggs, or a path that's organized to develop sperm. You can't be on
Okay.
both paths. No one no one can self-impregnate. There are no hermaphrodites in humans. We're not, tapeworms, or we
Well, so the gender ideologists are going to glom onto that minority and say, what do we do for these people? This 0.002% of people who have these disorders, they need to be included. So, what would you say to that idea? If they want to compete, for example, in a sport, how do you determine which are they male? Are they female? Is that easily determinable?
It's pretty easily determinable with a cheek swab, and ultimately, in the past of human history, it has not been a massive challenge. The Olympics used to just have cheek swabs. They've really only, in, I think, they uninstated it sometime in the 90s. I would have to go back and check, but
Sure.
you know we have had a very easy way, an uninvasive way to check for these things. And
Okay.
I think that's a conversation that can be had. I don't think males with male disorders of sexual development should compete with women. I'm not 100% sure what the best thing to do for them is, but they do have levels of testosterone. Plus, males have a lot of things besides testosterone. That testosterone is an advantage, but their skeletal structure, their Q angle of hips is better for running, swimming, jumping, bigger heart and lungs, faster heat dissipation, better blood oxygenation, faster muscle twitch fibers, better grip, broader shoulders. There's
It goes on and on. Isn't even brain size and gray matter differentiate as
yeah,
well, don't
yeah.
they?
I mean, there are so many. There's just hundreds of differences between male and female bodies, and I think a conversation could be had about how we could, support men who have chromosomal disorders be able to compete. But I don't think it should come at the expense of female athletes. And I
Boom.
also don't think that the rare number of men with chromosomal disorders are the same as men who have mental, identity ideations that they're women. Leah Thomas,
Right.
he who has a fetish where he wants to look like a woman, and he
And see, this is where people get tripped up. Amy, I want to dive in on this because no pun intended, because people will say that's just cruel. You're saying he's mentally ill or he has a fetish. This is an individual. This is a human being. We need to take his needs into consideration. Okay. At whose expense, however? I mean, he went in that pool. Well, how do you answer to those people who want to be inclusive, who want to be tolerant, who want to be sympathetic,
I think
empathetic?
these words have been overvalued culturally. Words like inclusivity, words like kindness, words like validation. When inclusivity is great, it's great for the third grade birthday party, and yet invite the whole class. That is a perfect time to be inclusive. But in cases where we have issues of fairness, where we have issues of safety, boundaries are needed. Boundaries are necessarily exclusive. You can't have a boundary without exclusivity. When we are concerned with women's fairness and safety in sports, when we are concerned with privacy and bodily integrity in the locker room, boundaries are required. Boundaries are exclusive. They are necessarily going to exclude those who don't belong in the category. And when I talk about men and women, I don't go into this, what I call a secular religion. This ideology functions like a secular religion. It functions kind of like a Scientology. Scientologists believe in body thetans. I don't believe in body thetans, nor do I believe in some sort of innate gender identity. So I speak in terms of physical circumstances. Leah Thomas, his physical circumstances are that of a man. That's it. It's
Yeah.
simple. It's not complicated. And it's not women's responsibility to take care of his mental health. That's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to take care of his safety. It's whatever he chooses to do. If he has chosen to spend money to take testosterone blockers, if he has chosen to go on estrogen, if he has chosen to get facial feminization surgery, all of those purchases, to me, those are simply consumer purchases that have to do with an extreme body modification. Those purchases are his personal responsibility. They are not the responsibility of women.
Yeah, I'm so glad you put it in that sense of purchases, because I've often said, could I get breast implants because, that would help me be more of a woman. And I'd like to be more feminine, and I think I need bigger breasts in order to affirm my gender. So could someone else please pay for my breasts? I mean, that to me is what it's like.
Well,
I hope I'm not offending. Actually, I don't care if I'm offending. Gender affirming. Okay, I want fuller
well, and this
lips to affirm that I am
this would
feminine.
be a good issue if you wanted to press that issue. Let's say that would be an issue of sexism, because now we have an issue where one sex has access to a medical treatment that is denied to the other sex. Men can get a breast
Interesting.
augmentation as part of their gender affirming care, but women, the female sex,
But
are
women
denied it. So now
can't.
we have a medical issue of
Now
sexism.
we have
I
a
think someone should absolutely take this to court, as under Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, on the basis of sex. We cannot discriminate on the basis of
you
sex.
know what? Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll take it to court. I'm going to find a lawyer to represent me
Yeah.
and do it. Yeah, listen, there was a list put out by a Robin
Mm.
Atkins, harms caused by gender identity to women and children. And the first harm is the request women and children ignore their instincts, telling them there is a
Yeah.
man present. This goes back to your Little Red Riding Hood. So we've got women and children, let's say in a restroom, and a male walks in who is clearly a male, maybe dressed as a woman. And you're asking these women and children to not believe their eyes and to feel like unthreatened and okay, surely he's not here to harm me, even though that's an occasion where a lot of harm does get inflicted on people. Um, and I listen, I know people who've said, I don't care if there's a man in the restroom with me, but I I
Yeah.
do. Why should we care?
Well, again, this is it's a very basic safeguarding issue. Those spaces exist for privacy. Men do not belong in there. And for, again, the vast majority of our history, it's been very easy. Good men stay out, so bad men stand out. It's
Oh,
something
yeah.
that just our simple social codes have been able to navigate. And you know no other animal on the planet would tell their young to disregard their instincts. No other animal on the planet would. A rabbit doesn't stand around trying to mentally understand the psychological reasons that the fox is there. They're not trying to be like, well, maybe it's a nice fox, and maybe the fox, they're not in some sort of a mental loophole. The ideology creates a cognitive disruption, because once you introduce this notion that some men are not men, now when a man comes in, instead of just reacting, like, hey, get out, or calling for
Yeah.
help, now we're in a mental loophole where we're trying to rationalize, well, maybe he's there because you know so we've left our instinctual responses. We're not responding
Right.
instantaneously. We're in a mental loophole. And safeguarding experts talk about this. I don't know if you know The Gift of Fear. Gavin de Becker, he is one of the premier safeguarding experts. He has dealt with celebrity stalking cases. He's consulted with the FBI. And he talks about this. He talks about humans are the only animal that rationalizes themselves out of listening to their instincts. And he tells,
And why do we do that? Why do we allow ourselves to do that?
well, we are also a herd animal, so we care about our social standing. And I think this ideology has been very effective at manipulating people based on how they will be socially received. I have lost many friends because of this issue. I know others who have gone through the same. The cancel culture around this issue is massive. And what I find, I talk about this a lot. And obviously, I have many people follow me because of what I'm saying, but I also get a lot of pushback. And what I find is that those who push back are unwilling. They don't grapple with my points. I'm always coming from the perspective of, these are our physical circumstances, and I'm advocating for safe spaces for women and girls, and I'm advocating for children to be unmedicalized, but they don't grapple with that. they immediately respond with, "You're a bigot, you're a transphobe." So
Yes.
it's
Yes. So they don't put your idea on trial. They just put your
yeah.
character on
And
trial.
I think many people are unable to sit still with that. It's very uncomfortable. And we know from other psychological studies like the Milgram experiment or the Ash conformity experiments, where they had the Ash experiment, just to put it simply, is this one where they had everyone was in on the experiment except one person, and they had these three lines, and the thing was to say which one is the shortest, and it's very obvious which one is the shortest, but all of the ringers who are in on it go around and they're like, line A is the shortest, even though it's not. And in most of the I think over 70% of the cases, the person, when they get to the end, the person who's like, oh my god, I know that line C is the shortest, but everyone is saying it's A, so they go along with it
Oh,
because there is a huge pressure, being a herd animal, to socially conform. And I think the
yeah.
propaganda in terms of what we see on social media, what we see in entertainment media, what we see in the news media, how this has been, how DEI is laid out in the workplace, how we see this in our education system, the pressure, even though we hear all the time, it's only 1% of the population. Well, for 1% of
Yeah.
the population, we have put in a massive infrastructure to get people to
Yeah.
conform to it. And we have made it very unattractive to not go along with it. And again, going back to the forced teaming of the LGB, no one wants to be homophobic, so
Yeah. And yet I have so many I've interviewed and I have talked to friends who are gay, lesbian, and they don't want that T
no.
attached anymore. They're like, this is not why we were doing this. This is not. Let me read another harm caused by gender identity is the request that women and children ignore their nervous system response, telling them there is danger when a man demands you lie to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what they are demanding is that we lie to
Yeah.
ourselves. That Dylan Mulvaney is going to get up there and say, "I am a
Yeah.
woman," and we know good and well because we've seen Dylan Mulvaney for years and years as a man. He looks great as a woman. I'll say he's what they call he has passing privilege. That's what
Well,
they call it when you can really
I
pass
mean,
as a woman. You have passing
I think he
privilege.
looks like a cute little gay drag queen. I don't think he looks like a woman. But the thing is, Dylan Mulvaney is a useful tool because
Hmm.
he is sort of the Trojan horse that hides the massive masculine, AGP, Caitlyn Jenner, Lily
Right.
Tino types. He's sunshine and rainbows, and he's
Yeah.
obviously gay, so he
Hmm.
is I don't think he should be in women's spaces, and I think he has very dangerous behavior in terms of normalizing this ideology and
Yeah.
normalizing men
Right.
in women's spaces. But ultimately, in terms of being this sort of, campy gay man, he is less
Y-
of a threat to women,
Yeah.
but he's the Trojan horse. He is the one who is allowing the likes. I don't know if you've seen the Lily Tino stuff blow up at Disneyland. He's been going into the bathrooms at Disneyland.
Oh,
He's been
yeah.
using, he's talking about his, privates on screen at restaurants in Disneyland. This to me, he's an example of a real predator who is
Yeah, and I was driving to my bank the other day, and there was a guy walking down the street who was clearly male, had allowed his hair to grow long, tons of facial hair, but just was dressing as a woman. My daughter was with me, and she said, "If he really wants people to treat him as a woman, why didn't he, look more like a woman?" But this clearly that's a fetish. It's a guy who likes wearing
yeah.
women's clothing. But what the other part about this, we're talking about women and children. I am most concerned about young
Absolutely.
people and children and these, gay. I don't. You can go to a drag show if you choose, but why would you take your children to see a gay or drag storyteller? I don't understand that. And I don't understand why there is such a, it seems, this effort to bring these books into classrooms, libraries, children's spaces. You get one
Yeah.
childhood. You get one childhood. Why wouldn't you want it to remain just innocent and pure? And so I don't, what do you make of the parents who encourage this stuff?
Again, I think there's a lot of social buy-in. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. And again, I think they think that they're this there's a lot of virtue signaling, and maybe they think they're doing
Yes.
something, that letting their kids go to drag story hour is somehow actually doing something for gay rights. The gay I came up in the theater. I taught theater for 20 years. I know a lot of gay men. I've been to drag. It is notoriously adult entertainment that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
associated with a lot of promiscuity and, frankly, a lot of drugs. And I don't think it's appropriate to be around kids. And I know many men who, have been former drag queens in their, younger years, who agree. They're like, why do grown ass men, in a hyper feminized, hyper sexualized outfit, why do they want to read to kids? What is this about? I mean, in a way, more than like, why do parents let their kids go? Why do they want to do it? And again, parents wouldn't
Yeah.
take their kids to see a stripper or a burlesque reading.
Right.
You wouldn't
Or a
you
porn
wouldn't
film.
take your kid to a hypersexualized woman for story hour.
Right.
Why
Right.
why are they dressed like that? There's a woman online, Exalancic, who calls them sex clowns, and that is what they look like to me. They're scary, they have crazy makeup, they look like sex clowns. And why are you taking your kids to
Yeah.
see sex clowns? And I think,
I, you know, I want to ask you before we run out of time about this recent Supreme Court ruling in Maine. There were parents of a variety of backgrounds, a variety of religions who wanted to be warned when there was going to be certain books read to their children. And this particular school district in Maine said, so many of you want to opt out. It's getting too complicated. So, no, we're not going to allow you to opt out anymore. uh, Point one, if so many people are opting out, maybe you should abandon the program. Point two, who are you to tell me that my kid has to listen to something that I think is inappropriate for them at this stage in their life? So the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the parents in this case. How momentous do you think that ruling is, and how far reaching might it be in this effort to just let kids be kids?
I hope, I have a lot of hope that it is setting a precedent that we have power. We have the ability to fight back. We have the ability to stay grounded in reality and say what is true. Um, I think that hopefully other school districts, parents in other school districts will see this, and be able to respond, because ultimately this ideology does function like a religious belief. It is a belief that is outside of physical reality. It requires
Mhm.
belief. We used to be able to see a man in a dress and think that is a cross dresser. That's a man in a dress.
Right.
No one was asking us to believe something other than what we were seeing. And anything that is asking kids that, I want to say one thing if we're wrapping up. It is very important for parents to hear this. And any parent knows this. When kids are about the age of 2, they're going through language acquisition. And language acquisition, they're saying, "Mommy, that's a bird." And the mom says, "Yes, that's a bird." Or they're saying, "Daddy, that's a tree." And the dad says, "Yeah, that's a tree." This is language acquisition, but it is also internal authority building. It is naming and claiming, and it is learning to trust your own body, to tell you the truth about the world around you and to keep you safe. And when kids are led down a path where they cannot trust the signals of their own body, this is a setup for further predation. This makes them vulnerable to predators because they feel like they can't trust their signals. They can't trust themselves to know what is true and what is not true. So this ideology in the schools is especially dangerous. And the problem is not just the books. The problem is the pronoun rituals in the classroom.
Yes.
The problem is going around and saying, about your fellow students, what are these fellow students' pronouns? And now I see Jimmy, but Jimmy says he's she, they. And again, it's a practice of cognitive disruption that, just like that second tier, it disrupts you from your natural nervous system response. It disrupts you from your ability to name reality, and it disrupts you from being able to trust the signals of your own body. And this is a really dangerous and vulnerable place to lead your child. Again, every other animal in the animal kingdom helps their young hone their instincts, sharpen their instincts, be faster at responding to their instincts, be better and fiercer in their instincts. And it is a cultural toxic illness that we are leading kids down a path to dissociate from those safety instincts.
That is so important. Will you come back and we can talk more another time? You have so much good information.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that would be great. I so appreciate you. I end every podcast saying, be brave and do good. And with the you're doing
Thank
good.
you.
And with the cultural pressures out there, and as you said, the pushback from people who have no other argument except you're a transphobe, you're courageous as well, and we appreciate that. You can follow her on, what is it again? The True
Known
Heretic, the Real
heretic, yeah.
Heretic. Known Heretic. I'm sorry. And we've put that up there graphically so
That's
people,
okay.
and it's in the show notes as well. Follow her on X. It's really valuable stuff. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Hey, you can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.